Nigeria's global oil and gas market share is seen shrinking drastically as attention shifts elsewhere and towards the emerging Africa oil countries. Nigeria has declined from being the third largest exporter of crude oil to the US to being the sixth, with volumes falling from over 1 million in the late 1990s to just 350,000 barrels in February. Joining us for more insights is Dave Ernsberger. He's a global director of oil at Platts. Now, very good afternoon to you, Dave. Now, looking at the situation over there in Nigeria, are there signs to indicate that Nigeria is really losing its edge in Africa?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mashudu. And, you know, for those of us who are looking at Nigeria's situation in the world, there has been a sense over the last couple of years that perhaps Nigeria has begun to lose some of the shine and some of the luster of its heyday of the late 90s and early part of the 2000s. And that's a combination, I think, of frankly an inability to really put an end to the rebel activity in the Niger Gulf, but also maybe a much bigger sense of unease about the fact that Nigeria's exports are tied to the United States. As you rightly point out in your lead up there, now the U.S. is still a significant consumer of oil and a major importer of oil. It's still the largest importer of oil today. But of course, the U.S. is not where the story is anymore. The story is now in China and India and the Middle East, which is no news to your viewers, of course. But there's a sense maybe that Nigeria has got itself hitched to the wrong wagon here.
Now, looking at the U.S., there's also talk that the U.S. is turning to Canada for supply of crude oil. Now, talk us through the impact of what this could have on demand coming through from Nigeria.
Well, the U.S. has got two major stories going on right now when it thinks about its own security of supply. The first story is that it has increasing volumes available to it from Canada. You're right to say that. There's been a lot of effort in the last couple of years to build new pipeline capacity to bring some of the heavy Canadian crudes down into the U.S. where it could be consumed, and it would push out some of the heavier crude supplies from places like Venezuela and the Middle East. The other story is the one that Nigeria should be more concerned about, which is the rise of domestic U.S. crude oil supply. With this new phenomenon, or relatively new phenomenon, we know as shale crude. The shale crude being produced in North Dakota, which in the last few months has been around 600,000 barrels a day, and Texas itself, from southwest Texas near the Mexican border, that crude is very similar in property, the light, sweet Chardonnay crude, the excellent crude that Nigeria has traditionally supplied, increasingly being found in abundance within the U.S. itself. And it's really those supplies that are beginning to push Nigerian supplies out of the market there.
What type of impact is the delay in the petroleum industry bill having in terms when you look at investments? We do have the bill sitting currently on the president's desk with the Assembly really waiting for a go-ahead.
Well, Mashudu, it's not all bad news for Nigeria, of course. There's plenty of things to be happy about. And the fact that President Jonathan has been signaling that he's determined to start putting the advancement of that bill forward at the top of his agenda has been greeted warmly by the oil industry and anybody who looks out for hopefully a brighter future for Nigeria. Also, the replacement of management at NNPC in the last few weeks has signaled that maybe the president really wants to go into action on some of these issues. Now, there's no shortage of companies that want to invest in Nigeria. A Chinese company has got 3 major world-class refineries on the board there. And in the last few weeks, Nigeria has signed a deal with an American company, who knows where that will go, but to build another 200,000 barrels a day of capacity. So there's plenty of investors there, and by and large, what they're waiting for is for the president to push that bill through, and more importantly, to give some sort of guarantee to the best of his ability that this is the way the country is going to go for the several years to follow, maybe even decades. But the market's looking for security and assurance that Nigeria has picked a path and is going to follow it.
Let's look at some of the competitors here on the African continent. We've got the likes of Angola, Kenya and Ghana emerging as oil producers. What kind of threat do these other countries pose to Nigeria going forward?
Well, I suppose when you look at the competitive landscape in Africa, both on the west and the east, countries that have aligned themselves with the growth markets of China and India are better positioned from an investment point of view and from a strategic point of view, perhaps, to grow their supplies and continue to edge Nigeria out of the market in the next couple of years. But Nigeria has got a fabulous history of oil production, and it has facilities available now for export to some of these countries. So I think it can be overstated what the threat is of some of those new producers. And as long as Nigeria gets its act together and looks for partners in the East to supply its crude to, there's no reason why Nigeria should be unduly concerned about those new sources of supply. But again, the market is looking for President Jonathan and NNPC to set some sort of a path for the next couple of years to reduce that uncertainty that tends to be part of Nigeria's reputation in the marketplace.
Indeed, looking at security, we know that Nigeria has a number of security issues, but you're looking at Kenya, the security issues aren't that great there. Your thoughts on the type of production we could see coming through from Kenya? We've had a lot of oil discoveries coming through over the past month, with Tullow Oil announcing some oil discoveries, particularly every month.
Yeah, there's been a lot of excitement about the discoveries of Tullow and other upstream wildcatters and explorers in that part of Africa. It's hard to say still what the flow rates are going to be like from those wells, and even what the quality of that crude might be like. So it's hard to say at this point with any kind of certainty how much oil will be coming out. The history of a lot of these projects suggests at least that they won't be anything like the world-scale supply coming out of West Africa. At least that's not what the early indications are. So there's a lot of excitement, a lot of noise. Those supplies are close to where they're needed in East Africa, but maybe not the same volume or quality as what's coming out of the West.